So I'm almost done ranking all of the big Oscar wins of the 2010s. Today, we're talking Best Director. Hi, it's Brian. Welcome to the Awards Contender. And yeah, Best Director of the 2010s. Which of those victories do I think are frickin' awesome, and which ones are pretty bad? Let's start with number 10, Tom Hooper, The King's Speech.
Plans for the coronation.
So I feel like I pick on The King's Speech a lot on this channel. Like, there's probably 10 to 15 videos where I say something negative about The King's Speech and how it didn't deserve to win Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, so on and so forth. Like I've done an Elusive Oscar video about Helena Bonham Carter. And like, she's good in that movie. Like, I don't know. Some of these nominations, some of these wins for The King's Speech are not my favorites. I feel like if that movie had to win something, it was Colin Firth for Best Actor. That one makes sense to me. Like, he basically swept the season. He's very good in that film. He had just been nominated for A Single Man. That's fine. I can also live with Best Picture. Even though I don't think it should have won that, I can live with that one. Best Director should have gone to David Fincher for The Social Network. Like, Best Director going to The King's Speech is weird to me. I don't really understand that one. Best Director and Best Picture at the Oscars often go to two different movies. They don't always overlap. I feel like for 2010, the directing job of The Social Network is so much more powerful, so much more impressive. There's a reason that David Fincher won Best Director at Golden Globes and Critics' Choice and BAFTA, because he truly was the director of the year. What he accomplished with The Social Network was extraordinary. And you look at his body of work going back to the 90s, he is one of our finest filmmakers. And you look at what Tom Hooper has put out after The King's Speech. Les Miserables, The Danish Girl, and Cats. Cats. And like, he has an Oscar for Best Director, but David Fincher, still to this day, 14 years after The Social Network came out, still has not won a gold trophy. That doesn't feel right to me. I don't know about you. It didn't feel right on the night, and it certainly doesn't feel right these days. The winner for Best Director that year should have been David Fincher.
I honor you, and the moral of the story is, listen to your mother.
Number 9, Michelle Hazanavicius, The Artist. So I practiced that pronunciation for like a full minute. Did I do okay? I don't know. Like, is that the hardest director's name to have to say, like, in the history of winners in this category? Here's the deal. I don't hate this win. I don't think this is a bad victory for him. The only Best Director Oscar win of the 2010s I fully don't agree with is Tom Hooper for The King's Speech. I mean, The Artist is a true original, especially for its time. We don't get silent feature films anymore, really. And so The Artist doing as well as it did at the box office, with critics, with audiences, at the Oscars, like, I'm never going to hate that. I watched The Artist in theaters once. I found it entertaining and interesting. But again, though, kind of like with 2010 and The King's Speech, I feel like The Artist could have won Picture fine, but Best Director could have gone to someone else. I think there are two other people in this category that would have been a much better win. One is Terrence Malick for The Tree of Life. That is an amazing movie. I've seen that 2 times, maybe 3. It doesn't all work for me, but it's so hypnotic. It has such a signature stamp from the director, and Terrence Malick has never won an Oscar, which doesn't feel right. Like, that would have been a better win here, I think, especially all these years later, as would have been Martin Scorsese for Hugo. I feel like if Scorsese hadn't just won Best Director for The Departed a few years back, maybe he could have been more competitive to win here, even if the artist had taken Best Picture, I feel like by 2011, 2012, if Scorsese had still not won yet, he might have won the Oscar for Hugo. I don't know. So, like, this victory for Hazanavicius, is that right? Is that how you say it? Is fine. And, like, he does some very interesting things in that movie, tricks with the camera. Some of it is very simple. Some of it is big and grand, like on a large scale. So, like, yeah, this win, I'm okay with it. I just don't think it's one of the best of the decade.
And sometimes life is wonderful, and today is one of these days. Thank you for giving it to me. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Number 8, Alejandro G. Inarritu, Birdman.
Yes, the kind of love that I'm talking about, it is absolute. The kind of love that I'm talking about, you don't try to kill people.
So this is another one that kind of surprises me because I very much liked Birdman in 2014. I think it was number 9 or number 10 on my top 10 list of the year. It's a very strong film, amazing ensemble, like the way the camera moves in that movie. Like there's a lot of cool stuff in Birdman, and yet I make all of these ranking videos for Oscar wins of the 2010s, and Birdman is like always near the bottom. It's just I prefer some other titles that came out that decade in picture, director, screenplay, and other things. Birdman, I have not had a desire to revisit that movie since I saw it in theaters a decade ago. I'm going to be talking about Birdman versus Boyhood in a few days. Get ready for that video because I have very strong feelings about the picture and director races of 2014. I was on Team Boyhood all of the way. Boyhood is a remarkable movie. It's kind of amazing that it ever happened in the first place. Again, it didn't have to win picture. Birdman could take picture, but in this case, as much as it is the case for 2010 Tom Hooper and David Fincher, for 2014, Best Director, I very much believe, should have gone to Richard Linklater. Here's someone else who definitely has his stamp on all of his projects, whether it's a more commercial movie, more of an art house film. His Before trilogy is my favorite movie trilogy of all time. And like right after the third installment of that trilogy came out, we got Boyhood, which he had been working on for more than 12 years, and that it turned out as great of a movie as it did. It doesn't feel like trickery. In a way, Linklater is kind of staying out of the way and letting that story tell itself the way it's supposed to be told. It's slow, it's real, it's fascinating, it's striking, it's so moving at the end. What Richard Linklater did with Boyhood is one of my favorite directing jobs of any movie ever made. And especially because Inarritu, as we're going to get to, wins a second director Oscar the following year, it just kind of enrages me. It's like, did he have to win both of those? Like, come on. But on the other hand, I understand why Inarritu won Best Director at the Oscars for Birdman. Like, there's a lot of really cool filmmaking tricks and tools he uses to tell that story. You walk away from that movie, if you know anything about how movies are put together, and you're going to be kind of wowed by what he was able to put on the screen. So it makes sense to me. I know why he won, but kind of like with Fincher and how he was winning some big prizes until Oscar night, Linklater won Best Director at Golden Globes and Critics' Choice and BAFTA. So Linklater had a path, like he got close, and I just think that would have been an all-timer win, like having Inarritu win 2 years in a row. It's like, okay, he's a very gifted filmmaker. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's okay. But Richard Linklater, come on. For 2014, he should have won the Oscar for Best Director.
I forgot worldview. I forgot so many people. This is like a slow motion kind of moment in my life. So forget if I forgot anybody.
Number 7, Alejandro G. Inarritu, The Revenant. So here he is again, the sequel. Inaritu wins a second time in 2 years in early 2016 for The Revenant, which was a huge box office hit, did very well with critics. It made my top 10 list of the year. I very much admire that film. Maybe more so at the time, seeing it opening weekend with a big crowd. I remember like 2 or 3 years later, I watched it alone at home, and it didn't quite resonate with me the same way it did in a theater. Some movies are like that. A big like spectacle sometimes only works really well in a movie theater, and then you watch it years later at home and you're like, what did I love about this so much? It doesn't work as well. I do think The Revenant is one of those titles that just, it doesn't have the same emotional power in your home, but it's still a very good film, great performances, amazing cinematography. If Inaritu had to win one Oscar in the 2010s, this is the one I prefer. Like, if he had lost to Linklater for Boyhood, he of course 100% was going to win this Oscar for The Revenant. But again, he wouldn't be my choice here. The person I think should have won Best Director for 2015 was George Miller for Mad Max Fury Road. That film cleaned house in the technical categories as it should have. What did it win? 5 or 6? It did very well. And I remember watching the ceremony that night, and I thought to myself, you know, Inaritu just won for Birdman. Maybe they will go for George Miller. That would be awesome. I didn't think that Mad Max Fury Road had a chance to win picture, but boy, they were giving gold trophies to Mad Max Fury Road left and right. And like, he is the reason that movie is as great as it is. What a spectacular vision. It would have been so well deserved for George Miller to have won Best Director that night. I still feel like that was a missed opportunity in a way. But again, The Revenant is a very strong movie. This is not a terrible win for Best Director. This is a solid second victory for Alejandro G. Inarritu.
I can't believe this is happening. It's amazing to receive this award tonight.
Number 6, Damien Chazelle, La La Land. So starting now, there's not another person in the category I would necessarily want to replace the winner with. Sure, 2016 was the year of Moonlight. That was my favorite film of the year. Barry Jenkins, of course, was nominated in Best Director. He would have made a great winner here. I'm so happy it won Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor, and eventually Best Picture. That's great. But weirdly, I do think Best Director for that year deserved to go to Damien Chazelle for La La Land. I don't necessarily think that Jenkins should have beaten him in that category. There's just something so stylish and original and daring and bold and courageous about La La Land on a directorial level. Like, what Chazelle was able to bring to that movie felt very personal, felt very much like a story he had been dying to tell for years. I think he tried to make La La Land before Whiplash, and no one would take a chance on him. And then after Whiplash was such a huge success, like at the box office with critics, at the Oscars, then he got to make La La Land. And you just see in every frame of that movie, he is having a ball and doing some really wacky, fantastic things with his cast, with the cinematography, with the story, with the music, with the color. Holy cow, the color in La La Land, it's something else. I feel like this was a pretty good win in Best Director for the 2010s, and he's still the youngest person to ever win in the category. That's also really cool. You don't see too many directors like in their early 30s being nominated at the Oscars. Damien Chazelle winning here is pretty great. I don't have it in the top 5. I couldn't put it any higher than number 6, even though I do very much appreciate this win for Best Director.
Thank you so much. This is such an honor. I just want to first thank my fellow nominees. I was absolutely honored and floored to be in your company this year.
Number 5, Guillermo del Toro, The Shape of Water. Now here is an Oscar victory for Best Director I put smack dab in the middle. It's very good. It's a great movie. I adore Del Toro going back to the 90s. He's one of my favorite directors. I'm so happy he finally got to win an Oscar in this category. In some ways, his movies are weird enough that I never thought it was going to happen. Like, Pan's Labyrinth got into the Oscars, it won a couple things, but like, that was such a striking, beautiful film. I couldn't believe that he couldn't get nominated for Best Director for Pan's Labyrinth. And then he makes like the Hellboy sequel and Pacific Rim, and I'm like, I don't think the Oscars are going to be in the cards for Del Toro. But then he makes this lovely, romantic, science fiction fable that awards voters really adored from the get-go, from Golden Globes all the way to the Oscars. That movie really resonated, even though it is pretty weird, and in a field of very strong movies, like Lady Bird, like Get Out, and so many wonderful films of 2017, The Shape of Water was able to rise to the surface to win Best Picture and Best Director for Del Toro. And I do think his win here is very impressive when you look at the competition. When you look at Greta Gerwig and Jordan Peele and Christopher Nolan for Dunkirk and Paul Thomas Anderson for Phantom Thread. Like, that is one of the best lineups of 5 directors in this category we have ever had in the history of the Academy Awards. So that's saying something that they went with Del Toro. I think this was very much deserved. What a vision he brought to that movie. It's so striking. I am so happy that Del Toro has won a couple of Oscars. He deserves them. He is fantastic. This victory for Best Director is a great one.
Like Jimmy Cagney said once, my mother thanks you, my father thanks you, my brothers and sisters thank you, and I thank you.
Number 4, Alfonso Cuarón, Roma.
Gracias. ¿Estás bien? Gracias. Yo no la quería.
Someone else in the 2010s also won Best Director twice, and that was Alfonso Cuarón, who I do think is the better double dip here. The better double victory by far. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't make too many movies. He made 2 films in the 2010s, and they both won him Best Director, and it's pretty remarkable, like how different the 2 films are, like how one is a much more kind of personal story told in black and white, with a cast you don't recognize, with just gorgeous cinematography, a very nice pace to the storytelling, indelible images. I have not been able to erase from my head, 6 years now since I first saw Roma. I have watched it twice. It's kind of a difficult film to watch over and over. There are some moments that really bother me in that movie, so it's not one I'm going to watch 10 times. But it's such an impressive achievement in the world of filmmaking. I do think it probably came close to winning Best Picture that year over Green Book. But like, Green Book was maybe a little bit more palatable for audiences, some awards voters, so that won at the end. I'm so happy Best Director didn't go to like Peter Farrelly for Green Book. Imagine if that had happened. So like, that would have been number 10 for sure in this ranking if Peter Farrelly had won. I'm happy he wasn't nominated. I'm happy that the winner here was Alfonso Cuarón. So well deserved. He's one of my favorite filmmakers. He's such a visionary. I'm just a few days away from finally starting his limited series Disclaimer on Apple TV+. I'm very excited to finally watch that. Oh boy, if this show is anywhere near the quality of Roma, I am in for a treat. But yeah, Roma is one of those movies that only comes along once in a while from a truly auteur director making something that means the world to him, and you can feel that in every frame. Alfonso Cuarón winning this Best Director prize is a fantastic victory.
Muchas gracias al Ivo, muchas gracias a mi familia, muchas gracias México, y sobre todo, muchas gracias Jonás Bu y Olmo.
Number 3, Ang Lee, Life of Pi. So here's another Best Director Oscar victory I think has aged really well. It has aged just as well as his first director victory for Brokeback Mountain. It's so silly that both of his movies that he won Best Director for did not go on to win the Oscars for Best Picture. Like, how did that happen? Because both Brokeback Mountain, as I've talked about, like, ad nauseum on this channel, like, what, 20 videos, maybe more, I don't know. Like, Brokeback Mountain, of course, should have won the Best Picture Oscar. Life of Pi didn't necessarily have to win Best Picture, but I think that's a much better movie than Argo. And it was just, that was a weird season. Argo not getting into Best Director at the Oscars for Ben Affleck, but Affleck won pretty much everywhere all season long. So going into Oscar night, it wasn't super clear who was going to win Best Director. A lot of people were predicting Steven Spielberg would take it for Lincoln, and that would have made sense. But my vote that night, the person I really wanted to win was Ang Lee for Life of Pi, because that movie is such a spectacular vision. Like, what he was able to accomplish in that movie. I don't think very many filmmakers would have been able to do what Ang Lee does and make it feel so authentic, natural. You don't sit there just thinking you're watching CGI. After a while, you get absorbed in that story of a young man and the tiger and their adventure together, that perilous journey they go on. It's quite something. I have seen Life of Pi at least 4 or 5 times. I cry every time. That movie just hits me emotionally, like few movies often do. I love it so much. I'm so happy it won a ton of technical prizes at the Oscars, and that Ang Lee won his second prize in Best Director, so well deserved. I always wonder if Ben Affleck had gotten in, he probably would have beaten Ang Lee, just how that all played out. Ben Affleck won basically everything, so he probably would have won the Oscar too, and that would have been fine. That would have been like number 8 on this list, I think, if Ben Affleck had won the Academy Award for Director. I'm happy, in a way, how it worked out that Ang Lee was able to win instead, because I do think that is a much better win. Ang Lee has not made a ton of great films since Life of Pi. I don't know what's happening there, but boy, Brokeback Mountain and Life of Pi, 2 of the great films so far this century. Ang Lee was an inspired choice to win Best Director at the Oscars for 2012.
Thank you, Academy. 谢谢. Namaste.
Number 2, Bong Joon-ho, Parasites. Alright, I might have surprised you on this one. You probably thought Bong Joon-ho was going to be number 1. Most people probably would have him at number 1. I get that. That makes sense. Parasite is one of the great films of the 2010s. His win, in a way, was kind of unexpected. Sam Mendes had been winning basically everything that season for 1917, which was a very impressive movie on a technical level, what Sam Mendes was able to accomplish in that film. I also was really taken by, but after Parasite won the SAG Ensemble Prize, like the momentum totally shifted to that movie. And on Oscar night, I was like, it's going to win International Feature, duh. It's going to win Original Screenplay. And I thought it was going to take Best Picture. I thought it could do it. Best Director seemed like it was going to go to Sam Mendes, and I was prepared for that. I really enjoy the career of Sam Mendes. He has made so many great films. But Bong Joon-ho, I mean, that was just one of the great wins of the decade. His speech is an all-timer, one of my favorite Oscar speeches, I would say, of the last few years. The way he got that audience to give Martin Scorsese a standing ovation. I will never forget that. It's such a wonderful speech in every way.
Thank you. I will drink until next morning. Thank you.
That win in director for Parasite is so fantastic. It's such a personal film. It's very much Bong Joon-ho, the way he masterfully balances all of those genres and takes us to places we don't expect. It's just such a unique movie on so many levels, and if you're going to reward it for the screenwriting, for the movie itself in Best Picture, Best Director also makes sense. So why do I have this at number 2 and not number 1? I don't know if you saw a recent video I put out. My top 10 favorite films of all time. Like, of all time, there is one movie currently on that list that has come out since, like, the 2010s. Of the last 14 years of film, of cinema, I have one movie on my top 10 list of all time. That film is Gravity. So my number 1 choice for the Best Director win of the 2010s at the Oscars is Alfonso Cuarón, Gravity. So I am going to keep this short. I don't need to go into all the reasons I adore Gravity with my full heart, why I watch it every single year, why I think it's one of the most spectacular cinematic achievements in recent years. This thing is something else, and I do think if there's one Oscar trophy that simply had to go to Gravity, it was Alfonso Cuarón in Best Director. He spent like 4 to 5 years with this project. He didn't know how they were going to do it. He initially thought it was going to be a very easy movie to make. That turned out not to be the case. And like, they had to invent new technology. They had to find a brand new way to tell this story in cinematic form. And what eventually came of Gravity, I think, is an all-timer. I think is a movie miracle. I have said before on this channel, if you go back and watch some videos, I am a lifelong Sandra Bullock fan. She is my favorite actress, and I waited after Speed for 20 years, basically, for her to show up in a great movie, giving a fantastic performance. That film was Gravity. It was everything I hoped it would be. Alfonso Cuarón had been proving for years just how gifted a filmmaker he was, with projects like A Little Princess and Y Tu Mama Tambien and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and especially Children of Men. Children of Men is an extraordinary film. I still can't believe he didn't make it into Best Director for that one. And then many years after Children of Men, along comes Gravity, and for me, it is his signature achievement. The movie I will most remember him for. I'm so happy he took a chance on that material, that he took a chance on Sandra Bullock for that lead role. Like, he gave her the role of a lifetime, and she was more than up to the task. Gravity is such a special movie to me. I'm so happy it won 7 Academy Awards, like a ton of trophies in the technical categories, along with Best Director. I wanted Gravity to win Best Picture that night. I think that would have been cool, but that was the year of 12 Years a Slave. That's a great win too, as I'll talk about in the Best Picture ranking video. Sandra Bullock would have been a great win in Best Actress, but that was the year of Cate Blanchett in Blue Jasmine, and she was unstoppable. I get that. But I'm so happy in Best Director, Alfonso Cuarón was able to take the gold trophy. I still think he deserved a standing ovation that night. What an achievement for Alfonso Cuarón, a movie that did well with critics, that did very well with audiences. It made like over $700 million worldwide. A story mostly of a woman alone in space, making over $700 million worldwide. Like, that shows you people really took to this film, that amazing performance by Sandra Bullock, and that extraordinary, once-in-a-lifetime directing job. I absolutely adore this victory for Alfonso Cuarón in Best Director. It is my #1 choice in the category for the 2010s.
Algo, yo por estoy aquí es por ti, y esto es para ti. Te amo. Bye, guys.
Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and let me know in the comments below how would you rank the Best Director Oscar wins of the 2010s, and I'll see you next time at the awards contender.